Every year in January, I like to spend the month going back and playing through any games I might have missed from the previous year, and this month, that was hard. I put a solid chunk of hours into as many games as I could this month, and I still feel like I barely made a dent in my 2021 backlog. There were so many huge releases last year that it felt like every week there was something new to talk about. So many charming smaller titles that went completely under my radar when they were released. And so many just flat out long games. It feels like 2021 was the year of long games. Like every single month, there was some brand new massive RPG out there that wanted you to spend 50, 60 hours on it. But January is almost up and I can't keep putting off 2022 any longer, so welcome everyone to my annual top 10 games of the year list. Now, I know that this should go without saying, but I do want to clarify, this is just my personal list of favorite games. And I want to stress that because A, I have weird taste, and B, as I said in that intro, there was so much I didn't get to last year because 2021 was jam-packed with games. So if I don't mention a game today, there's a really good chance I either didn't play it, or after putting dozens of hours into it, I still haven't beaten it and I don't feel comfortable ranking it until I do. But enough of that, let's go ahead and dive into my number 10 spot that I'm sure won't be controversial in any way and everyone is going to agree with it and we're all going to get along in Dark Pictures Anthology House of Ash. Okay, I'd like to repeat myself. This is just my personal list of top 10. And I do have weird taste. Yes, I know the Dark Pictures games have a lot of problems. Corny acting, unlikable characters, crazy amounts of pop-in graphics, god-awful running speeds. These games have always gotten pretty average reviews, and I can totally understand why. But I can't lie. I love these games, and I look forward to the new installment every single year. If a Dark Pictures game comes out, it's going to at least get an honorable mention on these lists. For anyone who has no idea why I like these games so much, I'm a big fan of horror, especially horror movies and horror anthologies. And this is essentially a horror anthology series where they ask you if you could survive a horror movie. But what gets these games on my best of the year list every single year is that I am a sucker for story-driven games where your actions actually decide where the story goes. And don't get me wrong, it's not like this is the only series out there that does that. No, not at all. But this series does it so well. These are games where every character can die, every character can survive, and when I screw something up and something bad happens, it feels like a punch in the gut. When a character is killed off in these games, I always feel like it was my fault. Because it was. And I love that a game can get that emotional reaction from me. And because the stories can split in so many different directions, these games have insane amounts of replayability. I always want to go back and play through them again the moment I finish them to see how much I can change. And when it comes specifically to House of Ash, this is easily the best game this team has put out since Until Dawn. Selim is a great character. The big final set piece had my heart racing for a solid hour. And all of these games have twists, and the last two twists kind of sucked. But the twist in this game actually left my jaw dropped. If you're down for a horror-based choose-your-own-adventure story and you haven't checked any of these games out yet, this is the one to start with. Number 9, Guardians of the Galaxy. Talk about the biggest surprise of the entire year. Not only did we not know this game was in development until just a few months before it was released, but when the game was revealed, most of the internet, me included, met the game with an overwhelming, oh no. Yeah, let's be honest, after that Avengers game, nobody was excited for another Square Enix Marvel game. So when we saw that there was going to be another Square Enix Marvel game featuring another team from the movies, everyone was nervous. But even just beyond the bad reputation that Marvel's Avengers had built up, that reveal wasn't great. I thought the jokes in the trailer were kind of groan-worthy, and I hated the costumes they gave them. Then the game came out, got amazing reviews, and even won the Game Awards for Best Narrative, so I said, you know what the heck, let me go ahead and try it. And yeah, this game is damn good. The hype is real behind this thing. The gameplay is actually really fun. Controlling your whole party at once just feels smooth and responsive. The dialogue and jokes are way better than they were in that trailer, and the amount of dialogue that they record for this thing is insane. No matter what you do, there is a line for it. Your choices actually do affect where the story can go, and most importantly, that story is excellent and is loaded with deep character moments. This is some of the best writing and character exploration in any superhero game I've ever played. And just speaking as a big comic book nerd, the amount of references and Easter eggs is, no pun intended, out of this world. The Guardians of the Galaxy don't have quite as much material to pull from as, say, Spider-Man or Batman or the Avengers, but they made sure to pull what they could. There are some deep cuts in this game, and again, as a comic book fan, I appreciated that. I am actually really tempted when that Avengers game comes to an end, and we all know it is eventually going to come to an end, to do a big retrospective on and just compare what this game did right to what that game did wrong. And one of the big points that I need to bring up is that this game actually feels like it was made by people that knew and liked the characters, which is kind of important. Also, I should go ahead and mention this. I do still have problems with the game's designs of these characters, but there are a ton of costumes that you can find for them in this game. Not through some weird microtransaction or in-game currency. No, the costumes are just in the game. You can just find them by exploring. And yeah, those costumes actually look pretty good. So just explore for a little bit, find some new costumes for the characters, swap them out, problem solved. Number 8, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. It has been a long time since I last played a Ratchet & Clank game, and even when I did play them back during the PS2 era, I'll admit they weren't my favorite from that generation of platformers. I was always more of a Jak and Daxter guy with a little bit of Sly Cooper on the side. Ratchet & Clank was always in third place for me. But as someone who always supports seeing an older IP come back, and someone with a PS5 who really needs to justify that crazy purchase, I decided to check out Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and wow, were the games always this good and I just didn't notice it, or is this the best game in the franchise? Okay, let's get the surface level stuff out of the way right now. Yes, it looks amazing, the load times are great, it's a PS5 game, all that stuff is obvious. But all the new weapons are a lot of fun. The levels are rewarding to explore. The concept of alternate realities is always something I'm a fan of. There's so much creativity behind every planet you go to, and there's tons of collectibles, and the stuff that those collectibles unlock, holy cow, none of it is mandatory. It's all just here for fun, but it is so fun. You can unlock journals that reference other Sony and Insomniac games. You can change the skin of your weapons or the bolts that you pick up, and you better believe I turned them all into energy drinks. And you can even customize your heroes in new costumes and mods, such as Big Head Mode, and every game should have a Big Head Mode. But the two things that I enjoyed the most about this game were, first, the new Heroes Rivet and Kit. These two are wonderful additions to the franchise, and I really hope they get their own spin-off at some point. And the other thing that really made this game stand out to me was just the tone. I always thought Ratchet & Clank had a pretty chill, easygoing vibe to it, and this game feels like they took that tone and matured it up a little. There's this moment in here where Ratchet is hanging out with Kit, who's going through several traumatic experiences, and he's just being super positive and supportive, and I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, that's actually a really good example of how to just be there for someone when they need someone to talk to. Or there's a moment where Rivet meets this person who hurt her in the past, and they have a great message in there about just confronting your traumas and learning how to grow from it. Heck, there's a moment in there where Clank is solving these puzzles, and he just goes into like this 2-minute long monologue about how he can do this, and I just thought, oh dang, that's actually a pretty good mantra to repeat to yourself if you need a self-esteem boost. This game just overall made me feel good inside, and as I said, Ratchet & Clank was always sort of that chill surfer friend of yours, but this game now feels like that surfer bro friend of yours grew up and is now a lovable hippie uncle who just gives you positive messages all day. Number 7, Metroid Dread. Speaking of supporting older IPs coming back, I would have gladly picked this game up even if I wasn't a Metroid fan, just because, well, it's Nintendo finally making another Metroid game. Of course I'm happy to see that happen and will gladly fork over $60 to let Nintendo know that. Now, I've been a Metroid fan since I was a kid, but I was always a casual fan. I played the games and I enjoyed them, but I never got that deep into the lore. I was mostly here for the gameplay. I've brought this up several times before, but I'm kind of an addict for Metroidvanias. You give me updates that let me go back to previous map points to open them up wider and find new secrets, I'm a happy man. And playing through Metroid Dread, I was a happy man. On a gameplay level, this is a great new installment in the Metroid series. The upgrades are cool, the map was challenging, the new Terminator Emmy units always kept me on my toes, and I love the boss fights in this game. Each of these boss fights always felt next to impossible at first, but then each time that I fought them, I got a little further. I did a little better. Not because I was leveling up and just brute forcing it, but because the game was forcing me to actually get better, to actually improve, to actually learn and grow. And when a boss fight can do that, it's an experience like no other. It's one of the things that I love about video games. But I made sure to bring up that I was a casual Metroid fan who never really cared that much about the lore, because while the gameplay is great, the thing that I have to applaud Metroid Dread for is that it's the game that made me care about the lore. I always thought Samus was cool because she was this serious silent badass, but this game gives her so many little animations that give her a personality. They make her feel like a pro who's been around, seen some stuff, and knows how to deal with it. And without getting too spoilery, let's just say that when the story decides to pick up, I was paying attention. This game adds so much more story to the series. The new villain Ravenbeak is one of the best in Nintendo's history, and at the end of the game, holy cow, I was being hit with so much information that just left me wondering where the heck it could all go. I am so glad that this game is selling well because I need a sequel just to see what happens next. Because there are so many things that could happen next. Number 6, Tales of Arise. The Tales of series is probably the winner of franchise I wish I could put more time into, but sadly I don't. Because I've only played Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Vesperia, and I love them. They're some of my favorite RPGs of all time, and every time that a new Tales of game comes out, I want to try it. But I rarely have time for a 100-hour-long RPG. But this year, Tales of Arise came out, and I said, darn it, I am going to make the time. I'm going to play through a Tales of game, and yeah, I can now put this right up there alongside those other two games. It's great. I was a little nervous going into it though, because I kept hearing that this game was going to be darker and more serious than previous Tales of games. And again, my experience with them is limited, but the tone of those games was one of the things that I enjoyed about them. And I also saw that they were revamping the combat system a bit, and again, I like the old combat system, so I was a bit worried, and all those worries were for nothing. Yes, this game is more serious, but it's still loaded with the charisma and charm that I enjoyed from the previous games. There's still incredibly likable characters. There's still a ton of fun, goofy skits between them. There's still this bright, colorful aesthetic. It's exactly what I wanted out of this franchise. And as for the combat, this feels like what the Tales of combat was always trying to be. It's got the same idea as the previous combat, but it feels so much smoother now. But beyond me just saying, hooray, it's that thing that I like from the older games, but even better. This is still a damn good RPG all on its own. The collectibles, the customization, the side quests, the monsters, it's all great, and I got way more addicted to hunting down all those recipes this time around than I ever thought I would. But all of that isn't the main reason this game made it this high on the list. No, that's because I always appreciate when a game has something to say. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that every single game out there has to have a big message. You can just be pure escapism fun. But if you do have something to say, yeah, I'm going to give you some extra points. And boy, does Tales of Arise have something to say. This game is about a group of people from space called the Renans who came down to the planet and enslaved the humans, or Danans as they're called in this game. And this whole game is about racism and colonialism, and they are not subtle about it. And I know some people are going to say that you should be subtle with your message. Sure, sometimes. But some other times, it's totally fine to be blunt. Sometimes that's the delivery method that fits the type of story that you're trying to tell. And that's the type of story they're trying to tell here, and it works. I actually have to respect how hard they leaned into this message. And it's not just a surface level message either. It's not them just coming in here like at the end of an 80s cartoon and saying, hey folks, racism is bad. No, they go deep with their analysis of this topic. It feels like every single land you travel to, every single villain you come across, heck, even a bunch of the side quests, they're all here to break down and analyze different parts of this topic. As I said, I respect when a game has something to say, and Tales of Arise has a lot to say. Number 5, Persona 5 Strikers. I would like to remind everyone once again that this is my personal list. These are my personal favorite games of the year. And I realize that means a lot of people are going to have questions. Alright, first the general praise. While I am not the biggest fan of Musou games, Persona 5 Strikers took the turn-based combat of the Persona series, something that could not be further from Musou combat, and somehow found a way to perfectly translate into Musou combat. That level of wizardry alone gets this game an honorable mention. And hell, I know that I'm being biased here, but this is easily the most fun I've ever had with Musou combat. Swapping between the personas and my party members to hit monsters' weaknesses, and hopping from one perch to another for special attacks and trying to build up enough mirror to do the big specials, it all just flows so well while keeping my mind focused and strategizing. And it looks gorgeous. They were able to translate the art style of Persona 5 right alongside the gameplay. But let's be real here. Let's get down to the reason that this game isn't just on my list, but it's all the way at number 5. I love Persona. I've talked about this numerous times, but it's my favorite game franchise. We even did a whole month of videos dedicated to it last year for the 25th anniversary. And Persona 5 is probably my second favorite game in the entire series, and this game is a sequel to that game. And I have to stress that it's an actual sequel. This isn't, hey guys, let's go back through our memories and replay all the events of the first game, but now with new gameplay. This isn't, oh, it's a new adventure, but we're just going to go to the same places and meet the same people and fight the same villains all over again. No, this is an actual full-length adventure with these characters in brand new locations with a brand new mission and brand new villains and brand new teammates. This is an actual sequel that nails exactly what I would want from a sequel. Characters from the first game get fleshed out even more with additional backstory. You get brand new teammates who have their own big emotional arcs, and I love these new characters, especially Wolf. I started playing RPGs when I was a teenager, and I loved that when I was playing these games, all the heroes were the same age as me. But now I've aged by several decades while RPG heroes have stayed the same age. And yeah, it felt really good to see a genuinely cool, likable, and relatable new hero join the Phantom Thieves who was actually older than me. It felt really good to actually point to a Persona user and say, oh thank God, I no longer feel like that Steve Buscemi Hello Fellow Kids meme when I play these characters. And I love the new villains. Sure, it is a bit of a shame that, mild spoiler, the big final boss is essentially the big final boss from the last game, but the new combat makes that final fight against them feel incredible. It is not the same encounter from the last time. And all the new human villains are more enjoyable than the human villains in the original game. I mean, heck, Tony Stark is a villain in this game. No, I'm not kidding you. There is a villain who is a rich tech genius who wants to be a hero in a big metal suit, and he looks like this. I actually have to respect how bold that choice was. Listen, I am eagerly awaiting the announcement of Persona 6. I can't wait for a brand new game with brand new characters in a brand new location. But when you spend 100+ hours with characters in a game that you love, it's natural to want one more adventure with them. And this game gave me exactly what I wanted. Number 4, Ender Lily's Quietus of the Nights. I'm sure many of you just perked up at this one because out of all the games I'm covering today, this one easily is the least known. Heck, the only reason I even know what it is because Steam kept recommending it to me over and over and over again. This game is essentially, imagine if Dark Souls was a Metroidvania, and to me that's like hearing imagine if peanut butter mixed with chocolate. And I know that many of you are rolling your eyes right now because these days if something is at all difficult, people say, oh, it's like Dark Souls. But trust me, that is not why I'm making the comparison. Don't get me wrong, it is difficult, but when I say it's like Dark Souls, it's because when it comes to the tone, the world, and the way that the story is revealed to you, Yeah, it's exactly the creepy, ominous, slow burn lore accumulation style of the From Software dynasty, which is one of the things that I love about that series. When this game begins, you're a little girl who wakes up in a dark dungeon and the ghost of a knight says, "Hey, we need to get out of here, but don't worry, I'm here to help." And that's it. That's all you get. And from there, you have to make your way through this world overrun by disgusting, rotting nightmares. And you slowly put the story together by finding notes and defeating bosses and absorbing their memories. And I love that. I'll admit I'm not the biggest fantasy guy, but I love dark fantasy, especially when they just throw you into the deep end of the pool and you have to figure out what the heck is going on. And as I played through this game and I had to piece together what happened in this world, finding one note that gave me a completely different backstory to the character, finding a new location that changed everything I thought I knew, it kept giving this game one layer after another. And it uses this lore to create some amazing moments and incredible boss fights. I was seriously tempted to do a spoiler talk on this game after I finished it because there's so many moments that just threw me for a loop. The fight with the dog? That's all I'm going to say, just the fight with the dog. And it is a Metroidvania, so of course there's a ton of secrets and collectibles in every single room that you can go back to, and it encourages you to look through every single nook and cranny, which I did. Yeah, this was one of the later games that I played this month, and the only reason that I decided to pick this game up instead of some of the other games that were on my backlog was because I saw that it was only about 10 hours long, so I said, perfect, I'll check this out, if I like it, then I'll race through it, and then I'll still have plenty of time for some of the other games that I need to get to. Cut to 22 hours later, and I've now gotten all 3 endings, found every secret relic, collected every single spirit, maxed out all my stats, and I'm grinding to hit level 100 so I can get the platinum trophy. This game was a massive surprise hit. If you like Metroidvanias, check it out. If you like Dark Souls, check it out. And if you like both of them, stop this video now and go play it. Number 3, Psychonauts 2. I love the original Psychonauts when it was first released. It had a wonderful story, hilarious dialogue, and really imaginative and creative levels. But the platforming was, yeah, not all that great. That's kind of always been the curse of Double Fine games. Brilliant ideas, memorable characters, witty writing, just okay gameplay. But I've been rooting for this series to return for about 15 years now, and this year it finally happened. And it kept all that stuff that I loved about the old games. It's got all the stuff that you would expect from a Tim Schafer project, great characters, imaginative worlds, everything that I just said. But now, the gameplay was actually really good. They did it. They actually managed to nail everything in this game. This really does feel like the ultimate Double Fine game, as everything that you always love from their games is firing on all cylinders in here, and they managed to fix the problems that I always had with their other games. And all those heaps of praise that I just laid on this game would be more than enough to get into the top 10, but what gets it this high is that this is one of the most mature games I've ever played when it comes to psychological issues. The whole premise of Psychonauts is you play as this kid who can travel into other people's minds, and in the last game, you did go into a few minds of people suffering from conditions, and they were kind of cartoonish depictions of these more serious topics. It felt kind of like how a Looney Tunes cartoon might address mental illness. But in this game, they have characters going through very real psychological issues, and this game, sure, it has some exaggerated depictions in order to keep with the tone of the game, but for the most part, they treat these conditions with the seriousness that they deserve, and with a level of detail that I rarely see being covered in any medium, all while still interpreting these serious issues into crazy over-the-top worlds with brilliant level designs that are just stunning at times. But that's not to say that this game is just overwhelmingly serious and it's not fun or adventurous. No, this is still a Double Fine game, and it is loaded with all the charm that you would expect. Not to spoil anything, but you eventually get a power-up that lets Raz, your little protagonist, create a duplicate of himself. And knowing who Raz's voice actor is, I lost my mind when I realized who was voicing their duplicate. And I can't not point this one out. Talking about the imagination in this game, there is a musical sequence from Jack Black that may very well be my favorite scene in any game I played this year. Number 2, Resident Evil Village. We stopped doing reviews on new games this year, but Resident Evil Village was one of the last games that we covered. And yeah, pretty much everything that I said in that video is still true. I love how they took the Metroidvania-style elements of the Spencer Mansion and the Raccoon City Police Station and expanded it to now being an entire village. I love that all the monsters and bosses are references to classic Universal monster tropes. That dollhouse is one of the scariest sequences in this franchise's entire history. The Duke went from being a character that I thought would just be a merchant ripoff to being one of the most solid video game bros this entire year. And somehow, against all odds, this game managed to make me actually care about Ethan Winters, a man who was literally designed to have no character. And now that it's been a few months since I played it, I can say I am actually upset that I haven't had the time to go back and replay it. Because all throughout this year, while I've been working on this channel or trying to play something new, I keep getting that pull. I keep feeling that call to go back to it, to try and beat it on harder difficulties and unlock more secrets. Maybe now that this list is all done, I can finally go back and put some more time into it, because I have not had desire to fully complete a Resident Evil game this hard since Resident Evil 4. Also, one real quick final note. I've had people come at me for praising this game and try to argue with me that this game is a bad Resident Evil game because it doesn't match the type of monsters and locations from the previous games. And to those people, please, just stop. I don't mean stop bugging me about, I mean please stop thinking that the entirety of Resident Evil is the first half of one game. This is a franchise where halfway through that first game, they just went, you know what? Giant frog monsters. Sure, giant frog monsters are now a thing. And in the second game, Venom. You have to fight Venom now. And for the third game, screw it, there's a Terminator now. And you have dodge rolls. Resident Evil is and always has been whatever the hell it wants to be. The only thing that unites Resident Evil games is a shared world, which this has, horror, which this has, item management, which this has, and over-the-top corny B-movie style characters and sequences, which this has. This is indeed a Resident Evil game, and it's a damn good one. Now, there's only one game left to cover, but before I get to that, let's run down a few honorable mentions. No More Heroes 3, I love Travis Touchdown, and it's great to see him back. I love that the big villain is essentially that douchebag friend of yours from college coming back to town, and the combat is just pure fun. But some of the stuff that you have to do to get to that combat is a little bit meh to me, so that's why it's not on the list. Cruisin' Blast. This is just great arcade racing wackiness. There isn't much more to this game beyond that, but hey, there doesn't need to be. It's just a pure fun sugar rush. Kazi and the Wild Mask. This is one of the best indie platformers I've played in years. It's so smooth and it feels so good to jump from one platformer or enemy to another that I found myself trying to speedrun these levels just because it was so fun to run through them. The only reason this isn't on the list is just because, well, I'm not that big of a platform fan, but if you are, you need to play this game. In Sound Mind, a pretty solid horror game that, yeah, does have some sort of bland elements, but the stuff that is good in this game is actually really well done. I mean, not to spoil it, but if you have played this game, that moment with the mannequin, yeah, that gets this an honorable mention all on its own. Death's Door. This game is so imaginative and so charming. There was actually a moment when I thought this might end up in my top 5, but just goes to show how hard the competition was this year. But it's still a really fun little adventure game that deserves your attention. Deathloop. I love this game's premise, and the two lead characters are some of my favorites all year long. Only reason it's not on the list is because I do admit replaying through some of the days over and over again did get a little tiresome, which I guess is kind of the point. But even then, I still love that each time that I visited a map on a different part of the day, some new bits of it would open up to me, I would find some new information. It did make exploring this world really fun. And lastly, Melty Blood type Lumina, which honestly, I'm mostly just putting on here because holy crap, Melty Blood came back in 2021. Nobody had that on their bingo card, and if Melty Blood can come back in 2021, just think of what could possibly come back in 2022. Under Night and Birth, I'm looking at you. But that brings us to our final game. My number one game of 2021 is Guilty Gear Strive. Even I am shocked that I am putting this at number 1 because out of all the games in my top 10, I think I might have had more problems with this game than any of the other games on this list. I'll admit I do miss many of the moves that were cut from the previous games. I kinda hate that they took out the insta-kills. That was always one of my favorite things from Guilty Gear. None of the DLC characters have really gotten me all that excited. I miss the big dynamic intros from the last game. It needs way more single-player content. And I never got used to these ugly lobbies. Damn, do they suck! But the fun that I got out of this game was still more than I got out of any other game this year. I put more hours into this than any other game this year. And I know that all over the FGC, everyone has been complaining about what Strive took away from the previous games, and as I said, I do miss some of those moves. But honestly, it doesn't bother me all that much. I mean, for starters, last year we did a big builder roster for Guilty Gear, and I went back and played through a ton of the older games for it, and I can tell you, yeah, this is just what Guilty Gear does. It puts out a new game that gets simpler, then they put out 12 updates for it that make it crazy again. So trust me, in a year, we're going to get Guilty Gear Strive Double Rave Climax Edition or some other weird word soup, and everything will be fine again. But also, people are acting like this game went from crazy anime fighter to Pong. This game is still wilder and nuttier than almost any other fighting game being supported right now. I feel like every single week a brand new combo for this thing gets uploaded onto Twitter that feels like pure madness compared to every other game on the market right now. In fact, prepare for my most controversial opinion. I actually think there are some things in this Guilty Gear that are better than the previous game. I think the Roman cancels work better in Strive than any other Guilty Gear game. And I love the breakable stages. They add so much more to the combat and give you a lot more that you have to think about. And speaking as someone who constantly has to stop and point out how bad he is at fighting games, I actually learned a ton from this game. I actually progressed further in this Guilty Gear than I did in any previous installment. I got higher on those ladders than I ever have in almost any competitive fighting game. And judging by the fact that this game has sold more than the last 3 Guilty Gear games combined, yeah, I'd say it's working for them. This game grew the Guilty Gear fanbase exponentially, and I can't wait to see how many of those new fans are going to stick around. But beyond the combat and the gorgeous graphics, the number one thing I have to give this game credit for is the online. This is easily the best online connection I've ever experienced. It made me look back at older games that I said had fine connections and made me realize I had no idea what I was talking about. And because of that, I spent so much time playing this game online. I honestly think I spent more time this year playing people online in Strive than I have spent playing online in any other fighting game in my life. It just felt that good. And lastly, the final thing that I have to applaud this game for is something I never thought I would give Guilty Gear credit for. The story. I have vaguely followed the Guilty Gear story in the past, enough to know who individual characters were, and that was about it. And then in the last couple games, Xrd Sign and Xrd Rev, I watched the story modes, and I kind of thought they sucked. So when I started up the story mode in Strive, I was prepared to turn it off as soon as I got bored with it, and I watched the entire thing in one sitting, and it was one of my favorite story modes in any game this year. I don't know if it's because the localization team and the voice actors were better this time around. I don't know if it's because I watched a massive retrospective earlier this year about the story of Guilty Gear, so now I understood more of it. Or maybe over the past 5 years, Daisuke Ishiwatari just became a better writer. But by the time this story was over with, I was speechless. I love this story. The villain is fun. Soul having to protect the president from terrorists was not the place I expected this story to go, but it was a wild ride. And the resolution? I couldn't believe what they did with it. Because there was a resolution. They actually took a story that had been running for 23 years and they brought it to a finale. And it felt perfect. This was a finale that had a conclusion to Soul's long journey. Not because he had to face off with some big villain, but because he finally faced off with his own personal demons. He finally confronted the pain that he felt from losing his loved one 100 years ago, and he was able to finally build a new life for himself. And it showed how much he had changed and grown over the course of this entire series. This game, where the villain is a rock and roll time-traveling witch and a hipster goblin named Happy Chaos. This game, where the hero is named Soul Bad Guy. This game, which has characters like a former drug addict becoming the ninja president of his own nation, and a vampire samurai, and a secretary of state who uses a coffin stuffed with an alien as a weapon, actually had a conclusion to its story that did a better job of wrapping up plot lines and moving its characters ahead than most movies and TV shows I've seen in the last couple years. So yes, I have problems with Guilty Gear Strive, but in the end, this is the game that made me care about these characters I've been playing as for 20 years. This is the game that made me really appreciate and understand the importance of rollback netcode in fighting games. This is the game that made me actually want to go online and actually compete against other players. This is the game that I had the most fun with this entire year. So how can it not be my #1 game of 2021? So there you have it, my top 10 games of 2021. Man, that is a weird collection of titles when you look back at, but I'm sure that we all have a weird collection of titles in our top 10. Let me know yours in the comments down below, and if you like what you saw here, then make sure that you ring that bell so that way you don't miss out on any of our videos. And of course, if you want to keep updated with what's going on with this channel, make sure that you follow us on Twitter at Thorgi's Arcade. Thank you guys again for tuning in, everyone. Stay safe out there, and come back next time.